Well, I thank my colleague from Tennessee for focusing on the American Great Outdoors Act. I had come to the floor to talk about the COVID-19 legislation we are considering, but I'm very pleased to be here with my colleagues who helped to get this legislation across the finish line. It's incredibly important and truly historic for our national parks. I have spent more than a dozen years on this. It's kind of embarrassing because I wasn't very successful for the first 11, but from my days as director of the Office of Management and Budget, I have been focused on what really is a tragic situation, about a $12 billion now maintenance backlog at our national parks, far more than the parks could ever afford to take care of based on our annual budgets. We provide them from this place, and yet something that had to be done. So not very exciting for some people to think about, gosh, fixing a visitor center, making sure a trail isn't eroding into the river, making sure that our roads and bridges in our national parks are kept up to speed, that when you go to a national park, you can actually, use the restroom facilities and the lodges. But we've had a huge problem with finding funding for that. And in this legislation, as was noted by my colleague from Tennessee, who's been at this for many years as well, we are finally doing something to help our parks that is badly needed. The priority projects, $6.5 billion worth, will now be handled by legislation that passed the House today by a 310 to 107 vote and passed the Senate a few weeks ago. The President has agreed to sign it, and it will keep our promise. And it is a debt unpaid to our parks. Without it, future generations wouldn't have the opportunity to visit and enjoy these incredible treasures. I spent the last few weeks at a couple of our national parks, one, the Charles Young home in Ohio, which is a beautiful historic home that is actually a station on the Underground Railroad and therefore has particular, very important historic significance for our state. Charles Young was the first black colonel in the United States Army, the first black superintendent of a national park, and his home needs to be preserved for future generations. And yet the maintenance backlog is huge there, as you can imagine, and without this legislation, they would not be able to make progress. And I got to see specifically what the money's going for, which is, making sure that house still stands years from now so that people, particularly young people in our community, can understand the history of our country, the good and the bad, the cooperation and the seeking for freedom that came from the Underground Railroad, and the incredible leadership that Charles Young showed as an early African-American pioneer, both in the military and in our national park system. And then I was at the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, where I had the opportunity to see the 13th most visited park in America and a number of different needs that they have, adding up to about $50 million. Their annual budget, by the way, is about $11 million. And yet they got $50 million worth of things that have to be fixed. I saw trails literally falling into the river. I saw railroad tracks for the beautiful scenic railroad that runs through there where the tracks have to be replaced. I saw a bridge that is truly becoming dangerous and has to be fixed. It's an historic bridge. These are things that can't be done with their normal budget that funds the rangers and some programs. These are capital expenses, things that have to have a separate funding source the way we budget around here, and we're doing that now. So after many years of trying different efforts at this and finding some success over the years, the Centennial Act has helped a little bit, some other things to get public-private partnership money. We now have the ability to really say that the parks are going to be in good shape for our kids, our grandkids, and the future generations that can enjoy what Lamar Alexander has referred to, I think, paraphrasing Ken Burns, as America's best idea. With that, I would yield back. I would like some time in a moment to talk about the COVID-19 legislation, but I'd like to yield now to the Senator from Tennessee.